The stagecoach rattled into Rock Springs, Wyoming territory, on a blistering August afternoon in 1878, carrying a woman who looked like she had fought the devil himself and barely escaped with her life. Zelda Garrison stepped down onto the dusty street with one arm pressed against her ribs, her face pale beneath the brim of her weathered hat. The scars that traced along her left cheek and disappeared beneath her collar told stories she had no intention of sharing with anyone in this God-forsaken town. She had come here because it was far enough from Kansas, far enough from the memories that haunted her sleep, and because no one here knew what had happened to her family 2 years ago. The town itself was nothing special, just another collection of sun-bleached buildings clustered around a main street that seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. Saloons, a general store, a boarding house, and a church that looked like it had seen better days stood as silent witnesses to whatever drama unfolded in this corner of the wilderness. Zelda had $200 sewn into the lining of her dress, a derringer in her boot, and absolutely no plan beyond surviving one more day. She limped toward the boarding house, each step sending sharp pains through her left leg, where the knife wound had never properly healed. The physical scars were visible to anyone who looked closely enough, but the ones carved into her soul ran far deeper. She had stopped sleeping through the night months ago. Every sound made her jump. Every man who looked at her too long made her hand drift toward the hidden weapon. The boarding house proprietor was a stout woman named Mrs. Henderson who took one look at Zelda and seemed to understand that questions would not be welcome. She handed over a key to a room on the second floor and quoted a rate that was reasonable enough. "Supper is at 6, Mrs. Henderson said, her voice carrying the rough edges of someone who had lived a hard life herself. "We do not tolerate drinking in the rooms, and gentlemen visitors are not permitted under any circumstances." "That will not be a problem," Zelda replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that overlooked the street. Zelda set down her single carpetbag and sank onto the bed, wincing as her bruised ribs protested. She had been traveling for 3 weeks, moving from one town to the next, always looking over her shoulder, always expecting to see the faces from her nightmares materializing in the crowd. That night at supper, she sat alone at the corner table, eating the beef stew and cornbread that Mrs. Henderson served without tasting any of it. The other boarders cast curious glances her way, but no one approached. She had become skilled at projecting an aura that said she wanted to be left alone. The next morning, Zelda went looking for work. She had been a schoolteacher before everything fell apart, but she doubted any town would hire someone who looked like her, someone who carried visible proof of violence on her skin. Instead, she tried the general store, the milliner's shop, and even the laundry, but everywhere she went, the answer was the same. They had no positions available, or they would keep her in mind, or perhaps she should try somewhere else. By midday, she was tired, discouraged, and running low on hope. She found herself standing outside the livery stable, staring at a handwritten sign that said "Help Wanted, Inquire Within." The stable was dim and cool after the harsh sunlight, smelling of hay and horses and leather. Zelda waited for her eyes to adjust, listening to the soft sounds of animals moving in their stalls. Then a voice spoke from somewhere in the shadows. "Can I help you?" She turned toward the voice and saw a man emerging from one of the stalls, wiping his hands on a rag tucked into his belt. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of weathered bronze. His face was sun-browned and honest-looking, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most. "The sign," Zelda said, gesturing toward the front of the stable. "It says you need help." He studied her for a moment, and she braced herself for the inevitable rejection. Men always looked at her scars and made assumptions, but instead of recoiling or making excuses, he simply nodded. "I do. Name's Samuel Keller. I run this place for the owner, but it's getting to be too much for one person to handle alone. Can you work with horses?" "I grew up on a farm," Zelda said. "I can muck stalls, feed animals, and do basic tack repair. I am not afraid of hard work." Samuel Keller smiled then, and it transformed his entire face. "That is all I need. The pay is not much, $1 a day plus meals. You would work from dawn until about 5 in the evening, 6 days a week. Sundays off. Does that suit you?" Zelda felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to be without it. "Yes, that suits me fine." "Good. Can you start tomorrow?" "I can start right now if you need me." Samuel shook his head. "Tomorrow is soon enough. Come by at dawn, and I will show you how I like things done around here." As Zelda turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "I did not catch your name." "Zelda Garrison." "Welcome to Rock Springs, Miss Garrison. I think you will find it a decent place to settle if you give it a chance." She nodded but did not reply. She had learned the hard way that nowhere was truly safe, that decency was often just a mask people wore until they decided to show their true nature. But she needed the work, and Samuel Keller seemed kind enough, so she would take the chance. That night, for the first time in months, Zelda slept for almost 5 hours straight before the nightmares woke her. She showed up at the stable the next morning just as the first light was breaking over the eastern hills. Samuel was already there, measuring out grain for the horses. He looked up when she entered and gestured toward a stack of clean overalls hanging on a peg by the door. "You might want to wear those over your dress," he said. "The work gets dirty." Zelda had worn her oldest dress, but she appreciated the practical suggestion. She pulled the overalls on and rolled up the sleeves, then followed Samuel as he showed her around the stable. There were 15 horses in residence at the moment, some belonging to local townspeople who paid for boarding, others transients whose riders were passing through Rock Springs. "The most important thing is water," Samuel explained, showing her the pump in the back courtyard. "Horses can go a while without food if they have to, but they need fresh water multiple times a day, especially in this heat. I check the troughs every few hours." Zelda nodded, committing everything to memory. Samuel explained his system for feeding, for rotating the horses through the small paddock behind the stable so they could stretch their legs, for keeping the tack organized and the stalls clean. He was patient and thorough, never making her feel stupid for asking questions, never staring at her scars even though she caught him glancing at them once or twice. They worked side by side all morning, and Zelda found herself relaxing in small increments. The physical labor felt good, honest and straightforward in a way nothing else in her life had been for a long time. Horses did not judge or ask uncomfortable questions. They simply needed care, and she could provide that. Around noon, Samuel brought out a basket that contained bread, cheese, and apples. "My landlady packs enough for 2, he said. "I suspect Mrs. Henderson mentioned to her that I hired someone new. Small towns, everyone knows everyone's business before it happens." They sat on hay bales in the shade of the stable entrance, eating in companionable silence. Finally, Samuel spoke. "You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to," he said quietly, "but I want you to know that I am not going to pry or make assumptions. Whatever brought you to Rock Springs is your own concern. All I care about is that you show up and do good work, and I can already tell you will." Zelda felt her throat tighten. "Thank you," she managed. "I will tell you one thing, though," Samuel continued, his voice still gentle. This town has its share of rough characters, like any place, but it also has good people. I have been here 3 years now, and I have found it to be a place where a person can start over if they need to. No one much cares what you did before or where you came from, as long as you are decent to them now. Zelda wanted to believe him, but belief had been beaten out of her along with so much else. Still, she appreciated his kindness. I will try to remember that. The afternoon passed quickly, and by the time 5 o'clock rolled around, Zelda was exhausted but satisfied. Her muscles ached in a good way, the kind of tired that came from honest work rather than fear and running. Samuel paid her the first $1 and told her he would see her tomorrow. As the days turned into weeks, Zelda fell into a routine. She woke before dawn, dressed quietly so as not to disturb the other boarders, and walked the 3 blocks to the livery stable. Samuel was always there before her, no matter how early she arrived, and they would work together until midday when they shared the lunch his landlady prepared. They talked little, but the silence between them was comfortable rather than awkward. Zelda began to learn things about Samuel in the quiet way people reveal themselves through actions rather than words. He was patient with difficult horses and children alike. He extended credit to people who were struggling to pay their boarding fees, never mentioning it or making them feel ashamed. He kept a ledger of accounts in handwriting that was surprisingly neat and educated. He never drank to excess, never visited the saloons except to collect payment for services rendered, and never once made Zelda feel uncomfortable or threatened. One afternoon in late September, a cowboy rode into town on a half-wild Mustang that was all nerves and fury. The horse reared and fought the bit, eyes rolling white with fear and confusion. The cowboy, drunk and mean-spirited, yanked on the reins and raised his crop. Samuel was out of the stable in 3 long strides. "That is enough," he said, his voice carrying an edge Zelda had never heard before. "You beat that horse, you will answer to me." The cowboy, a big man with scarred knuckles and a sneer, looked Samuel up and down. "This is my horse, and I will do what I damn well please with it." "Not here you will not." Samuel stood his ground, relaxed but ready. "You want to stable your mount, you treat it with respect. Otherwise, you can take your business elsewhere." For a long moment, the 2 men stared at each other. Then the cowboy spat in the dirt and wheeled his horse around, riding off down the street while cursing loudly. The Mustang, freed from the immediate threat, calmed slightly but still trembled with residual fear. Samuel watched them go, then turned back toward the stable. He caught Zelda staring and shrugged. "I cannot abide cruelty to animals. They do not have a voice to defend themselves." Zelda thought about that for the rest of the day. She thought about voices and defense and the ways people and animals alike could be broken by those stronger than them. That night, for the first time since arriving in Rock Springs, she spoke to Mrs. Henderson beyond the bare minimum of pleasantries. "Samuel Keller," she said as the older woman poured coffee after supper. "What do you know about him, Mrs.?" Henderson's eyebrows rose slightly, but she answered readily enough. "Good man. Came here about 3 years ago from Colorado, I believe. Worked as a ranch hand for a season, then took over managing the livery when old Mr. Patterson's arthritis got too bad. Honest as the day is long. Quiet, keeps to himself mostly. Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Zelda said. "He gave me a job when no one else would." "That sounds like Samuel." Mrs. Henderson settled into the chair across from Zelda. "He has a way of seeing past surfaces to what is underneath. It is a rare quality." Zelda sipped her coffee and said nothing, but she filed the information away. October arrived with cooler temperatures, and the first hint of the brutal winter that would follow. The leaves on the few trees in Rock Springs turned gold and russet before falling away entirely. Zelda had been working at the stable for 2 months now, and she had saved almost all of her wages. The physical labor had strengthened her body, and the routine had quieted some of the panic that used to grip her multiple times a day. She still flinched at sudden noises. She still woke from nightmares more often than not, but the sharp edges of her fear had dulled slightly, worn smooth by the passage of uneventful days and Samuel's steady, undemanding presence. One morning, Samuel arrived at the stable with a split lip and bruised knuckles. Zelda, who had learned to recognize the signs of violence, went very still. "What happened?" she asked. Samuel touched his lip gingerly and grimaced. "Ran into some trouble at the saloon last night. Nothing serious." "That looks serious." "The other fellow looks worse," Samuel said, then seemed to regret the levity when he saw Zelda's expression. "Truly, it is nothing to worry about, just a disagreement that got out of hand." But Zelda had spent too many years reading danger in men's faces to let it go. "What kind of disagreement?" Samuel sighed and set down the bucket he was carrying. "There was a woman being harassed. I intervened. The man took exception to my interference. We exchanged words, then fists. The sheriff broke it up before anyone was seriously hurt. That is the whole story." Zelda felt something shift inside her chest, a sensation she could not quite name. "You fought a man because he was harassing a woman?" "Of course I did." Samuel looked genuinely confused by the question. "What was I supposed to do, stand by and let it happen?" Most men would have, Zelda thought but did not say. Most men would have looked the other way, told themselves it was not their business, or worse, joined in. But Samuel had put himself at risk for a stranger, and he seemed to think this was simply what any decent person would do. "You could have been hurt worse than this," Zelda said quietly. "So could she." Samuel picked up his bucket again and headed toward the water pump. "Come on, the horses are hungry, and standing around talking about my poor decisions is not getting them fed." But Zelda did not move immediately. She stood there watching Samuel's retreating back, feeling the careful walls she had built around herself beginning to crack in ways that both terrified and intrigued her. The truth was that she had started to look forward to her mornings at the stable. She had started to notice small things about Samuel, like the way he hummed while he worked, or how he always checked on the oldest horse first because he worried the gelding was not eating enough. She noticed that he treated her like a person rather than a broken thing, that he never pushed for information about her past, that his kindness seemed genuine rather than calculated, and that scared her more than anything. That evening, as they were finishing up the last of the chores, Zelda found herself speaking before she could reconsider. "The scars," she said abruptly, "on my face and my leg, do they bother you?" Samuel paused in the act of hanging up a bridle. He turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. "Bother me how? Make you uncomfortable? Make you wonder what kind of woman I am, that I carry marks like these?" He was quiet for a long moment, and Zelda braced herself for platitudes or worse, pity. But when Samuel spoke, his words were neither. "Scars just prove you survived," he said simply. "They prove you are strong. Whatever happened to you, you lived through it and you kept going. That does not make me uncomfortable. If anything, it makes me respect you more." Zelda felt tears prick at her eyes, the first she had allowed herself to shed in months. She turned away quickly, pretending to adjust the latch on a stall door. "I should go. Mrs. Henderson will be serving supper soon. Zelda." She stopped but did not turn around. "Thank you for telling me," Samuel said softly, "and for trusting me enough to ask." She nodded once, then left the stable before the tears could spill over. That night, Mrs. Henderson found Zelda sitting on the back porch of the boarding house long after dark, staring up at the stars. The older woman brought out 2 cups of tea and settled into the other chair without asking permission. "Want to talk about it?" she asked. Zelda accepted the tea and wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "I do not know how," she admitted. "Start anywhere. Or do not start at all. Just know the offer stands." They sat in silence for a while, sipping tea and listening to the night sounds of the town settling down for sleep. Finally, Zelda spoke. "2 years ago, my family was killed. Mother, father, younger brother. I was the only one who survived." The words came out flat, emotionless, because that was the only way she could say them. "It was a robbery, or at least that is what they called it. 3 men came to our farm outside Abilene, Kansas. They took everything we had, which was not much, and then they took more just because they could. Just because no one was there to stop them." Mrs. Henderson made a soft sound of sympathy but did not interrupt. "I fought back," Zelda continued. "I had my father's rifle and I shot one of them, but there were 3 and I was alone, and I was 19 years old and terrified. They hurt me in ways I will not describe. They left me for dead alongside my family, but I did not die. I laid there for 2 days before a neighbor found me. And then I spent 6 months recovering, and when I could finally walk again, I left Kansas and never went back." "Oh, my dear girl," Mrs. Henderson reached over and squeezed Zelda's hand. "No one should have to endure such horror." "The worst part is not what they did to my body," Zelda said. "The scars on my skin will fade eventually. But the ones inside, the fear that lives in my chest every moment of every day, the way I cannot trust anyone, the way I wake up screaming, those scars feel permanent. I do not know how to heal them. I do not know if I ever will." Mrs. Henderson was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Healing is not a straight line, child. It is not something you accomplish once and then you are done. It is something you work at every day, sometimes every hour, and it is easier when you have people around you who care." "I do not know how to let people care," Zelda whispered. "I do not know how to be that vulnerable again." "I think you are braver than you give yourself credit for," Mrs. Henderson said. "You came here alone. You found work. You are building a life for yourself despite everything that tried to break you. That takes more courage than most people will ever understand." Zelda thought about Samuel's words earlier. "Scars just prove you survived. You are strong." Maybe he was right. Maybe survival itself was a form of strength, even when it did not feel that way. November brought the first snow, and with it, a new challenge. A family arrived in Rock Springs traveling west to California, but found themselves stranded when their wagon broke an axle and their horses came up lame. The father, a harried man named John Mitchell, brought the horses to the livery for Samuel to examine. Zelda was cleaning tack when they arrived. She heard Samuel's low voice talking to the man, heard the sound of hooves on the wooden floor as the horses were led into stalls. Then she heard a child crying and a woman's soothing murmur. Curious despite herself, Zelda set down the bridle she was working on and moved toward the front of the stable. The Mitchell family consisted of the father, his wife Catherine, and 3 children ranging from perhaps 4 to 10 years old. They all looked exhausted, hungry, and worried. Samuel was crouched down examining one of the horse's front legs, his face serious. "This one has a strained tendon," he said finally. "She needs rest at least 2 weeks, maybe more. The other one has an abscess in his hoof. I can treat it, but he should not be pulling a wagon for a while either." John Mitchell's face fell. "We do not have 2 weeks. We need to reach California before the mountain passes close for winter." "I understand, but if you push these animals now, you will lame them permanently. Then you will be stuck here all winter anyway, except with horses that cannot work." Catherine Mitchell spoke up, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. We spent almost everything we had to buy those horses and that wagon. We do not have money for boarding fees or lodging. What are we supposed to do? Zelda found herself stepping forward before she had consciously decided to speak. There is a small room in the back of the stable, she said. It is used for storage now, but it has a stove. You could stay there, and in exchange, Mr. Mitchell could help with the stable work to earn the boarding fees for the horses. Samuel looked up at her, surprise and something else, something warm in his eyes. That is a good solution. The room needs clearing out, but there is space for a family. And I could use an extra pair of hands while the horses heal. The relief on the Mitchell family's faces was immediate and profound. Catherine Mitchell's eyes filled with tears. That is so kind. We do not know how to thank you. No thanks necessary, Samuel said, rising to his feet. Let us get you settled. The next few days were busy as Zelda and Samuel helped the Mitchell family turn the storage room into livable quarters. They moved boxes, swept out cobwebs, and made sure the stove was working properly. Mrs. Henderson, hearing of the situation through the town grapevine, donated some blankets and a few basic cooking supplies. Zelda found herself warming to Catherine Mitchell, who, despite her own troubles, had a gentle manner and a quick smile. The children, once they got over their initial shyness, started following Zelda around the stable, asking endless questions about the horses. The oldest child, a girl named Emma, was particularly fascinated. How did you learn to do all this? She asked one afternoon, watching Zelda brush down a tall bay gelding. I grew up on a farm, Zelda said. My father taught me to handle horses when I was about your age. You still live on the farm? Zelda's hand stilled for a moment. No, my family is gone now. Emma, with the uncomplicated acceptance of childhood, simply nodded. That is sad, but at least you have Mr. Samuel. He is nice. Zelda resumed brushing, hiding a small smile. Yes, he is. That evening, as Samuel and Zelda closed up the stable for the night, he spoke quietly so the Mitchell family would not overhear. Thank you for suggesting they stay here. I was trying to figure out how to offer without making them feel like charity cases. It seemed like the practical solution, Zelda said. They need help and we can provide it without much hardship to ourselves. Still, it was kind. Samuel paused, seeming to struggle with something he wanted to say. You have a good heart, Zelda Garrison. I hope you know that. Zelda felt heat rise to her cheeks. I am not. I just know what it is like to need help and not have anyone offer it. Which is exactly why it matters that you offered it to someone else. Samuel held her gaze for a moment, and Zelda felt that same shift in her chest, that dangerous softening of her carefully maintained defenses. Good night, Zelda. I will see you tomorrow. Good night. As Zelda walked back to the boarding house through the cold November darkness, she realized with a start that she was smiling. When had that started happening? When had she stopped flinching at every shadow and started noticing things like the way lamplight made Samuel's eyes look warm, or the sound of his laugh, or the gentle competence of his hands as he worked with the horses? She was falling for him, she realized with a jolt of fear so intense it almost stopped her in her tracks. She was falling for Samuel Keller despite her best efforts to keep everyone at arm's length, despite her determination never to be vulnerable again. The thought terrified her. But it also filled her with something else, something she had not felt in 2 years. Hope. December arrived with brutal cold and frequent snowstorms that made travel nearly impossible. The Mitchell family's horses healed slowly but surely under Samuel's careful treatment. John Mitchell proved to be a hard worker, and his help allowed Samuel and Zelda to take on additional projects they had been putting off, like repairing the stable roof and replacing some rotted boards in the stalls. The children brought life and noise to the stable in a way that surprised Zelda. She had thought their constant chatter and questions would annoy her, but instead, she found their innocent enthusiasm oddly healing. They did not look at her scars with horror or pity, just curiosity that was easily satisfied with simple explanations. "Were you in a fight?" Emma asked one day, studying the scar on Zelda's face. "Yes." "Did you win?" Zelda thought about that. Had she won? She had survived, but at such a terrible cost. "I suppose I did," she said finally. "I am still here." Emma nodded sagely. "That is good. Mama says as long as you are still here, you can have another chance at happiness." Out of the mouths of children, Zelda thought. Your mother sounds very wise. Christmas approached, and the town of Rock Springs came alive with preparations despite the harsh weather. The church organized a communal dinner for those who had nowhere else to go. Mrs. Henderson decorated the boarding house with pine boughs and ribbon. Even the saloons hung wreaths on their doors. Samuel surprised everyone by announcing that he was hosting Christmas dinner at the stable for anyone who wanted to come. "The Mitchells cannot exactly go anywhere in this weather," he explained. "And I figure there are others who would appreciate company and a hot meal." Zelda found herself volunteering to help with the preparations. She and Catherine Mitchell spent several afternoons planning the menu and making lists of supplies. Mrs. Henderson contributed a ham and promised to bake bread. Other townspeople, hearing of the plan, offered to bring dishes to share. On Christmas Eve, Zelda worked late at the stable helping Samuel set up tables and benches in the main aisle. They had moved some of the horses to the paddock, despite the cold, to make room for people. A large fire burned in the potbelly stove, and lanterns hung from the rafters cast warm pools of light. "This was a good idea," Zelda said, standing back to survey their work. "You have a generous spirit, Samuel Keller." Samuel shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "I spent too many holidays alone when I first came west. I remember what it felt like to have no one. I do not want anyone else to feel that way if I can help it." Zelda felt her heart constrict with emotion. "You are a good man. I try to be." Samuel moved closer, close enough that Zelda could feel the warmth radiating from his body in the chilly stable. "Can I tell you something?" "Yes." "Having you here, working beside me these past few months, it has meant more to me than I think you realize. I was lonely before you came, even though I did not fully recognize it. But now I cannot imagine going back to working alone. I cannot imagine," he paused, seeming to gather courage. "I cannot imagine this town without you in it." Zelda's breath caught. "Samuel." "You do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. Whatever you have been through, whatever brought you here, I am grateful for it because it brought you to me. And I know you carry scars inside and out, but those scars do not make you broken. They prove you survived. They prove you are strong, stronger than you probably believe." Tears spilled down Zelda's cheeks before she could stop them. "You do not understand what you are saying. You do not know what happened to me, what was done to me. I am damaged, Samuel. I am not whole anymore." Samuel reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. "You are whole. You are right here, breathing, living, fighting to build something new despite everything trying to destroy you. That is not damage. That is strength. That is courage." "I do not feel strong," Zelda whispered. "You do not have to feel it for it to be true." Samuel's hands cupped her face with infinite gentleness. "I am not asking you for anything you are not ready to give. I just needed you to know that I care about you. That I see you, all of you, and I am not afraid of your scars." Zelda closed her eyes, letting herself lean into his touch for just a moment. It felt dangerous and terrifying and wonderful all at once. "I care about you too," she admitted, "and that scares me more than anything." "I know." But maybe, if you are willing, we could try being scared together. We could try building something new, one day at a time, no pressure, no expectations, just seeing what happens." Zelda opened her eyes and found Samuel watching her with an expression so tender it made her ache. "I do not know if I can be what you need. I do not know if I will ever be normal again." "I do not need normal. I just need you exactly as you are." Samuel smiled slightly. "Besides, I am not so normal myself. I am a cowboy who would rather talk to horses than most people, and who thinks hosting Christmas dinner in a stable is a good idea. We can be not normal together." Despite everything, Zelda felt a laugh bubble up from somewhere deep inside. "That might be the most ridiculous thing anyone has ever said to me. But you are smiling." "I am." "Then it was worth being ridiculous." Samuel dropped his hands but did not step away. "Think about what I said, all right. There is no rush. I will be here whenever you are ready." Zelda nodded, not trusting her voice. Samuel gave her one more smile, then turned back to adjusting the tables. She stood there for a moment, watching him work, feeling something unfurl in her chest like a flower that had been waiting years for spring. Christmas dinner was a roaring success. More than 20 people showed up, including several ranch hands who had nowhere else to go. A few families from town, Mrs. Henderson and several of her boarders, and even the sheriff, a gruff man named Tom Garrett who was known for his fairness. The children ran between the tables, laughing and playing, while the adults shared food and stories and companionship. Zelda found herself seated next to Samuel, their shoulders occasionally brushing as they ate and talked with their guests. She felt his presence like a physical warmth, anchoring her when the noise and crowd threatened to become overwhelming. Several times, when anxiety started to creep up her spine, Samuel seemed to sense it and would gently touch her hand or catch her eye and smile, bringing her back to the present moment. After the meal, someone produced a fiddle and impromptu dancing broke out. Zelda watched from the sidelines, content to observe, until Samuel appeared in front of her and held out his hand. "Dance with me. I have not danced in years. I am not sure I remember how. Then we will make it up as we go." His eyes were warm with invitation but no pressure. "Only if you want to." Zelda looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Then, taking a breath for courage, she placed her hand in his. Samuel led her into the cleared space where other couples were spinning and laughing. He kept his movements simple, just a basic two-step that Zelda found she could follow despite her nervousness. His hand was warm at her waist, solid and reassuring rather than threatening. They moved together to the bright, cheerful music, and Zelda felt something loosen inside her with each step. "You are doing fine," Samuel murmured. "I am terrified," Zelda admitted. "Of dancing, of this, of you, of what I am starting to feel." Samuel's hand tightened slightly on her waist. "I am a little terrified too, if it helps. I have not cared about anyone this way in a long time. The possibility of losing you, or of doing something wrong and driving you away, it keeps me up at night. You could not drive me away if you tried. I think I would have left already if I was going to. Is that your way of saying you are planning to stay?" Zelda met his eyes and found herself nodding. "Yes, I think it is." The smile that spread across Samuel's face was radiant. "That is the best Christmas present I have ever received." They danced 2 more songs before Zelda needed to step away and catch her breath. But she found herself smiling as she watched Samuel get pulled into a reel with Emma Mitchell and some of the other children. He was patient and goofy with them, letting them stand on his boots while he danced them around, making them shriek with laughter. Mrs. Henderson appeared at Zelda's side. "That man is in love with you." "I know," Zelda said softly. "I think I might be in love with him too." "Then what is stopping you?" "Fear. The past. The certainty that I am too broken to deserve happiness. Mrs. Henderson snorted. Child, we are all broken in one way or another. The trick is finding someone whose broken pieces fit with yours. Samuel Keller looks at you like you hung the moon, and you look at him like he might be the sun. Do not let fear rob you of something beautiful. Zelda thought about that long after she returned to the boarding house that night. She lay in her narrow bed, listening to the wind howl outside, and allowed herself to imagine a future. A future where she was not always running, not always afraid. A future where Samuel's gentle hands and kind eyes were part of her everyday life. A future where her scars were simply part of her story, not the whole story. It felt impossible and fragile, like a soap bubble that might pop at any moment. But it also felt worth reaching for. The new year of 1879 arrived with brutal cold and snow that piled in drifts higher than Zelda's head. The Mitchell family's horses were finally deemed well enough to travel, but the mountain passes remained closed. John Mitchell made the difficult decision to stay in Rock Springs until spring, and Samuel helped him find work at one of the local ranches to earn money for their journey. The stable was quieter without the children underfoot every day, but Samuel and Zelda had settled into an easy partnership that felt like the most natural thing in the world. They worked together seamlessly, often knowing what the other needed before words were necessary. They shared meals and conversation and comfortable silences. And slowly, carefully, they began to explore the possibility of something more. It started with small touches. Samuel's hand on the small of Zelda's back as he passed behind her, Zelda's fingers brushing his as she handed him a tool. Each touch was tentative, asking permission, offering reassurance. Then, one snowy afternoon in late January, Samuel kissed her for the first time. They were in the tack room, organizing bridles that had gotten tangled. Zelda reached for a buckle at the same moment Samuel did, and their hands collided. They both laughed, and then somehow they were standing very close, close enough that Zelda could see the individual lashes framing Samuel's warm eyes. "Can I kiss you?" Samuel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zelda's heart hammered in her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to protect herself, to not allow this vulnerability. But she looked at Samuel's face, open and patient and full of something that looked like love, and she found herself nodding. Yes. Samuel cupped her face in his hands, the same gesture he had used on Christmas Eve, and lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was soft and sweet and unbearably gentle, asking rather than demanding. Zelda froze for a heartbeat, her mind flooding with memories of violence and pain. But then Samuel's thumb stroked her cheek, grounding her in the present, and she let herself sink into the kiss. It was nothing like the brutal claiming she had experienced before. This was different. This was a question and an answer, a conversation, a promise. When they finally pulled apart, Zelda was trembling. "Was that all right?" Samuel asked, concern creasing his forehead. "It was perfect," Zelda whispered. "It was scary and perfect. We can go as slow as you need. There is no rush." Zelda nodded, grateful beyond words for his patience. "Thank you for understanding. Always." They stood there for a long moment, foreheads resting together, breathing the same air. Then Zelda pulled back and smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "We should probably finish organizing this tack before it gets dark." "Practical as always," Samuel teased gently, but his eyes were warm. As winter gradually loosened its grip and February arrived with slightly less bitter cold, Zelda and Samuel's relationship deepened. They stole kisses in the quiet moments between chores. They held hands as they walked through town together, and Zelda found she no longer cared what people might think or say. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for their futures. Samuel told Zelda about growing up in Colorado, the youngest of 5 children, about how his parents had died of fever when he was 18, leaving him adrift and alone, about his years of wandering from town to town, ranch to ranch, never quite finding a place that felt like home until Rock Springs. Zelda, in turn, slowly began to share her own story in greater detail. She told him about her parents, her brother, the farm she had loved. She told him about the day that changed everything, the violence and terror and grief that had shaped the last 2 years of her life. Samuel listened without judgment, holding her when she cried, offering quiet comfort when words failed. "I am so sorry that happened to you," he said one evening as they sat together in the stable office, snow falling softly outside the window. "I wish I could go back and stop it. I wish I could take away your pain." "You cannot change the past," Zelda said. "But you have given me something I did not think I would ever have again. You have given me a future worth imagining. That is more than enough." Samuel kissed her temple. "You are the strongest person I have ever met, Zelda Garrison. I hope you know that. You keep telling me, and maybe someday I will believe it. I will tell you every day until you do." In early March, the weather finally broke enough for the Mitchell family to resume their journey to California. The whole town turned out to see them off, bringing gifts of food and supplies for the road. The children clung to Zelda and Samuel, crying and making them promise to visit someday. "You saved us," Catherine Mitchell said, hugging Zelda tightly. "We would have frozen or starved if not for your kindness." "You would have done the same for us," Zelda replied. After the Mitchells' wagon disappeared down the muddy road, Zelda felt Samuel's arm come around her shoulders. "Going to miss those kids? Terribly. The stable will seem too quiet without them. Maybe we will have to think about filling it with noise again someday," Samuel said carefully. "I mean in the future, our future, if you wanted." Zelda turned to look at him, her heart suddenly racing. "What are you saying?" Samuel took both her hands in his, right there in the middle of the street with half the town potentially watching. "I am saying that I love you, Zelda. I have loved you since that first day when you walked into the stable looking like you were ready to fight the world, but also like you desperately needed someone to tell you it would be all right. I love your strength and your courage and the way you care for the horses and the way you smile when you think no one is looking. I love everything about you, scars included. And I know we have not been courting for very long, and I know you might need more time, but I had to tell you, I love you." Zelda felt tears streaming down her face, but for once they were happy tears. "I love you too, Samuel. I did not think I could love anyone again. I thought that part of me had died. But you showed me it was just sleeping, waiting for someone gentle enough and patient enough to wake it up." Samuel pulled her into his arms, holding her close while she cried against his chest. When she finally pulled back, he was smiling through his own tears. "So what happens now?" Zelda asked. "Now, if you are willing, I would like to marry you. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday when you are ready. I want to build a life with you, Zelda. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to face whatever the future holds together." "Yes," Zelda said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." Samuel's smile could have lit up the entire territory. He picked Zelda up and spun her around right there in the muddy street, laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, he kissed her soundly, not caring who might be watching. Mrs. Henderson, observing from the boarding house porch, smiled and went inside to start planning a wedding. They married in late April, as spring was finally asserting itself over the Wyoming landscape. Wildflowers bloomed on the hillsides, and the air carried the scent of new growth and possibility. The ceremony took place in the church, with nearly the entire town in attendance. Zelda wore a simple dress of pale blue that Mrs. Henderson had helped her sew, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Samuel had picked himself. Samuel wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed for once, and when Zelda walked down the aisle toward him, his eyes shone with unshed tears. The Reverend kept the ceremony short and sweet. When it came time for the vows, Samuel took Zelda's hands and spoke from the heart. "Zelda, I promise to love you every day for the rest of my life. I promise to be patient when you need space and present when you need comfort. I promise to honor your strength and support you when you feel weak. I promise to build a home with you, a safe place where we can both heal and grow. I promise to remind you as often as necessary that your scars only prove you survived, that you are strong, and that you are deeply, completely loved." Zelda's voice shook as she replied, "Samuel, I promise to love you with everything I have. I promise to trust you even when trust is hard. I promise to let you in, even when fear tells me to build walls. I promise to work beside you and dream beside you and face whatever comes with courage. I promise to remind you, as often as necessary, that you saved me in ways you probably do not even understand, and that you are the best man I have ever known." When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed Zelda with a tenderness that made several of the watching women dab at their eyes. The reception was held in the town hall, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the night. Zelda danced until her feet ached, Samuel's arms around her, surrounded by people who had become friends and family. She caught Mrs. Henderson's eye at one point and mouthed, "Thank you," and the older woman simply smiled and nodded. Late in the evening, as the party was winding down, Samuel and Zelda slipped away. They walked hand in hand through the quiet streets of Rock Springs to the small house Samuel had rented for them, a cozy two-room structure not far from the stable. "Welcome home, Mrs. Keller," Samuel said, unlocking the door. Zelda smiled at the name. "I like the sound of that." Inside, Samuel had prepared everything. There were flowers in a vase on the table, fresh linens on the bed, and a fire burning in the fireplace. Zelda felt her nervousness return as she looked at the bed, memories of violence trying to intrude on this beautiful moment. Samuel, sensing her tension, took her hands. "We do not have to do anything tonight except sleep if that is what you need. I meant what I said. No pressure, no expectations. Just us together." Zelda took a shaky breath. "I want to try. I want to replace the bad memories with good ones, but I need you to be patient with me. As long as you need. I am not going anywhere." What followed was slow and gentle and healing in ways Zelda had not anticipated. Samuel treated her like she was precious and cherished, never rushing, always checking to make sure she was all right. When the fear threatened to overwhelm her, he stopped and held her until it passed. When she cried, he kissed away her tears and told her she was safe. By morning, Zelda felt like a different person. She felt reclaimed, like she had taken back something that violence had stolen from her. She lay in Samuel's arms, listening to his heartbeat, feeling peace settle over her like a warm blanket. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For being patient, for being gentle, for loving me through all of this." Samuel kissed the top of her head. "Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done." They spent their first weeks of marriage settling into their new life together. Zelda moved her few belongings from the boarding house to their little home. They established routines, simple domestic rituals that felt sacred in their ordinariness. Samuel made coffee every morning while Zelda fried eggs. They walked to the stable together, worked side by side through the day, then returned home to share supper and conversation and quiet companionship. Zelda's nightmares became less frequent. When they did occur, she woke to find Samuel already awake beside her, ready to hold her and remind her that she was safe. Her hypervigilance slowly ebbed, though it never disappeared entirely. Some scars, she learned, were permanent, but they no longer defined her entire existence. Summer arrived hot and bright, and with it came news that shook the small town. The railroad was planning to extend a line through Rock Springs, which meant growth and change and opportunity. Samuel and Zelda talked long into the night about what this might mean for them. "We could expand the stable," Samuel said. "With more people coming through town, we will need more space for horses and wagons, maybe even hire another person to help. Or," Zelda said slowly, "we could think about buying our own place. A small ranch, maybe, where we could breed and train horses. Something that is truly ours." Samuel's eyes lit up. "I love that idea. It would be hard work. Everything worth having is hard work. Then let us start looking. Let us build something together, Zelda, something that will last." Over the next several months, they saved every penny they could spare. Samuel took on extra work, and Zelda began giving riding lessons to some of the town children, charging a small fee. By autumn, they had saved enough for a down payment on a small property just outside town, 20 acres with a creek running through it and good grazing land. The previous owner, an elderly rancher ready to retire, sold it to them at a fair price. Samuel and Zelda moved their belongings to the small farmhouse on the property and began the hard work of building their dream. They repaired fences, constructed a new barn, and acquired their first breeding pair of horses, a beautiful mare and a sturdy stallion with good bloodlines. The work was backbreaking, from dawn until well past dusk most days. But Zelda had never been happier. She loved waking up next to Samuel in their own home, loved working land that belonged to them, loved the simple satisfaction of building something from nothing. In December, almost a year after their Christmas wedding engagement, Zelda realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain, then told Samuel one evening as they sat by the fireplace, exhausted after a long day of work. "I have news," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Samuel looked up from the ledger he was updating. "Good news, I hope." "I think so. I am, that is, we are going to have a baby, in early summer if I am calculating correctly." Samuel stared at her for a long moment, and then his face broke into the most radiant smile she had ever seen. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "A baby! We are going to have a baby! Zelda, that is wonderful! You are happy about it?" "Happy, I am overjoyed. A little terrified, but mostly overjoyed." He pulled back to look at her face. "What about you? How do you feel?" "The same. Overjoyed and terrified in equal measure." Zelda bit her lip. "I did not think I would ever have this. After everything that happened, I thought the possibility of a family was gone forever, but now it feels like a second chance. Like proof that I really did survive, that there is life after trauma." "You are the strongest woman I know," Samuel said, echoing the words that had become something of a mantra between them. "You will be an amazing mother." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and as Zelda's belly grew, so did their excitement. They prepared a small nursery in the corner of their bedroom, with a cradle that Samuel built himself and baby clothes that Mrs. Henderson and the other town women contributed. In June of 1880, after a long labor that left both Zelda and Samuel exhausted, they welcomed a healthy baby boy into the world. They named him Thomas Henry Keller, after both their fathers. Holding her son for the first time, Zelda wept with joy and relief. She traced her finger over his tiny features, marveling at the miracle of his existence. This baby represented everything she had fought for, everything she had survived to have. He was proof that love could triumph over violence, that beauty could grow from ashes. "He is perfect," Samuel whispered, gazing at his son with wonder. "He looks like you," Zelda said. "He has your chin, and I think he will have your stubbornness. Good. He will need it to survive having you as a father." Samuel laughed, then leaned over to kiss Zelda gently. "Thank you for this gift. Thank you for trusting me enough to build this life with me." "Thank you for being worth trusting," Zelda replied. The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and exhausted days, but also in moments of transcendent joy. Zelda discovered reserves of strength she did not know she possessed, and Samuel proved to be a devoted father, happy to walk the floor with a crying baby at 3 in the morning or change diapers without complaint. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. Word spread about the quality of the horses Samuel and Zelda raised, and they began to attract buyers from across the territory. They hired a young man named Peter to help with the heavier work, freeing up time for Zelda to focus on training and Samuel to handle the business side of things. On Thomas's first birthday, they threw a party that brought together everyone who had become important in their lives. Mrs. Henderson came, along with several of their friends from town. The sheriff and his wife attended. Even the Mitchell family, who had made it to California and were visiting family in Wyoming, detoured to Rock Springs for the celebration. Emma Mitchell, now taller and more grown up at 12 years old, held Thomas on her lap and declared him the cutest baby she had ever seen. "You two built something really special," she told Zelda. "I remember how sad you looked when we first met you. You look so happy now." "I am happy," Zelda said simply. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be." That night, after all the guests had gone home and Thomas was asleep in his cradle, Zelda and Samuel sat on their porch watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "You ever think about the past?" Samuel asked quietly. "Sometimes," Zelda admitted. "The nightmares still come occasionally. I still have moments where I feel afraid for no reason. I do not think those scars will ever completely fade. But they do not control me anymore. They are part of my story, but they are not the whole story. You help me see that. You help me understand that scars just prove you survived, that you are strong enough to keep living." Samuel took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "You did that yourself. I just reminded you of what was already there." "We did it together," Zelda said. "And I think that is the point. Healing is not something you do alone. It is something you do with people who love you, who are patient with you, who see your worth even when you cannot see it yourself. I love you, Zelda Keller. I love the woman you were, the woman you are, and the woman you are becoming. I love you too, Samuel. Thank you for teaching me that love does not have to hurt. Thank you for showing me what gentleness looks like. Thank you for being my safe place." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of their ranch. Finally, Samuel spoke again. "Should we think about giving Thomas a little brother or sister eventually?" Zelda smiled. "Eventually, but maybe let us enjoy having one baby for a while first." "Fair enough. Though I have to admit, I like the idea of a house full of children, noise and chaos and love." "That does sound nice," Zelda agreed. "A few years from now, when things are a bit more settled, I think I would like that too." 2 years later, in the spring of 1883, Zelda gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah Grace. She had Zelda's dark hair and Samuel's warm eyes, and she was doted on by her older brother, who appointed himself her protector from the moment he met her. The ranch continued to grow and thrive. Samuel and Zelda built a reputation for honesty and quality that brought them steady business and respect throughout the territory. They added more land, more horses, and eventually hired 2 more hands to help with the work. Zelda, who had once been too afraid to be touched, now moved through the world with confidence and grace. She gave riding lessons, trained horses with patience and skill, and managed the household and ranch finances with competent efficiency. The scars on her face had faded to thin white lines that she no longer tried to hide. When people asked about them, she answered simply and without shame. "I survived something terrible," she would say. "These scars are proof that I am still here, still fighting, still living." Samuel, watching her interact with customers or laugh with their children or work with a particularly difficult horse, often found himself marveling at the woman she had become. Or perhaps, he reflected, the woman she had always been, underneath the fear and trauma. He felt privileged to witness her healing, to be part of her journey from survival to thriving. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Zelda with a trip to Cheyenne. They left the children with Mrs. Henderson, who was now semi-retired and delighted to spoil her honorary grandchildren, and spent 3 days in the territorial capital. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate in restaurants, and attended a theater performance. On their last night, as they walked back to the hotel under a canopy of stars, Zelda stopped and turned to Samuel. "Thank you for this. Thank you for everything, really. For 5 years of patience and kindness and love. For giving me a life I did not dare dream about. For showing me that I was worth saving." "You saved yourself," Samuel said, cupping her face in his hands the way he had that first Christmas Eve when everything changed. "I just had the privilege of being there to witness it." "We saved each other," Zelda countered. "You were lonely and drifting when I met you. We both needed someone to anchor us, someone to believe in us. We found that in each other. Then I guess we are both lucky, incredibly lucky." Zelda rose on her toes to kiss him, a kiss that still made her heart race even after 5 years of marriage. "I love you, Cowboy. I love you too, Mrs. Keller, forever and always." The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and joys. There were hard winters and drought years when money was tight. There were illnesses and injuries and worries. But there was also laughter and love, and the deep satisfaction of watching their children grow. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses as much as his parents did. Sarah was bold and adventurous, always climbing things she should not and asking questions that made her parents laugh. In 1886, they welcomed a 3rd child, another son named William, who was quiet and observant from birth. The ranch that Samuel and Zelda built together became one of the most successful horse operations in Wyoming territory, known for producing animals with good temperaments and strong constitutions. They employed several permanent hands and took on apprentices who wanted to learn the horse trade. Zelda became known in Rock Springs and the surrounding area as a woman of substance and character. She served on the church committee, helped organize the school board, and was known for her generosity to families in need. People who met her for the first time might notice the scars on her face, but that was rarely what they remembered about her. Instead, they remembered her strength, her kindness, and the obvious love between her and her husband. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel and Zelda took all 3 children on a picnic to the spot where they had decided to buy the ranch. They spread a blanket near the creek and watched their children play in the water while they relaxed in the spring sunshine. "Do you remember what you told me once?" Zelda asked, leaning against Samuel's shoulder. "About scars proving that you survived, that you are strong." "I remember. I think about those words often. They changed everything for me. They helped me see myself differently, to understand that surviving was its own form of victory." Samuel pressed a kiss to her temple. "You would have figured it out eventually. You are too strong to stay broken forever." "Maybe. But having you believe in me made the journey easier. Made it possible even." Zelda watched their children laughing and splashing, their innocent joy a balm to her soul. "Look at what we built, Samuel. A family, a home, a life. 10 years ago, I never could have imagined this. I was just trying to make it through each day without falling apart. And now I wake up every morning grateful. Grateful for you, for our children, for this ranch, for the second chance at life that I thought I had lost forever. The scars are still there, inside and out. I still have hard days sometimes, but they do not define me anymore. Love defines me. Family defines me. The choice to keep going despite everything, that defines me." Samuel pulled her close, overcome with emotion. "You are the bravest person I know, Zelda Keller, the absolute bravest." "I learned it from you," she said softly. "You showed me what courage looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to love and trust and build despite the fear." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their children and counting their blessings. Finally, Thomas called out that he had found a frog, and both parents went to investigate, their laughter mingling with that of their children on the warm spring air. The years turned into decades. Wyoming Territory became Wyoming State in 1890, and Rock Springs continued to grow and prosper, with the railroad bringing new people and opportunities. Samuel and Zelda grew older together, their love deepening and maturing with time. Their children grew up strong and capable. Thomas took over much of the ranch operation in his 20s, proving to have inherited his father's patience and his mother's steel. Sarah surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, much to Zelda's delight. William pursued a career in veterinary medicine, studying in Cheyenne, before returning to Rock Springs to establish his own practice. In 1899, on their 20th wedding anniversary, Samuel and Zelda stood on the porch of their ranch house and looked out over land that had become home in the truest sense. They were in their mid-40s now, their hair showing threads of silver, their faces lined by sun and laughter and the passage of time. 20 years, Zelda marveled. It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. Best 20 years of my life, Samuel said, wrapping his arm around her waist. Mine too, though they were not always easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. Zelda thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment, the violence and loss that had nearly destroyed her, the desperate flight that had brought her to Rock Springs, the day she walked into a livery stable looking for work and found instead a future she had not dared hope for. She thought about all the moments in between. The first time Samuel told her that scars just prove you survived. The Christmas Eve when he said he cared about her. Their wedding day and the births of their children. The countless ordinary moments of work and love and shared life that had accumulated into something extraordinary. "I want to tell you something," Zelda said. "Something I have never properly put into words. I am listening. You saved my life, not just in a metaphorical sense, though that is true too, but literally, you saved my life. When I came to Rock Springs, I was not really living. I was existing, surviving, but there was no joy, no hope, no future. I was so broken I could not imagine ever being whole again. But you saw past the brokenness. You saw the woman I could become if someone just gave me a chance. You believed in me when I could not believe in myself. You loved me when I felt unlovable. You were patient when I needed space and present when I needed support. You showed me that not all men are violent, that love does not have to hurt, that intimacy can be healing instead of harmful. You taught me that scars, both visible and invisible, are not signs of weakness but proof of strength. You gave me back my life, Samuel Keller, and I will spend every day I have left on this earth grateful for that gift." Samuel's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You gave me just as much, Zelda. Before you, I was drifting, going through the motions but not really living either. You showed me what it means to truly love someone, to partner with them in building something meaningful. You made me want to be a better man. You gave me a family and a home and a purpose. We saved each other, my love. That is what we did. Then I guess we are even. I guess we are. They stood together watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and rose and purple. Somewhere in the barn, one of the horses whinnied. From the house behind them came the sound of their daughter Sarah playing piano, preparing for a recital at the school where she taught. Thomas and his young wife were expected for dinner, along with William, who had closed his veterinary practice early for the occasion. Life was good. Life was rich. Life was full of love and purpose and meaning. The scars remained both inside and out. Zelda still occasionally woke from nightmares, though they were rare now and less vivid than they used to be. She still noticed threatening behavior more quickly than others might, still positioned herself so she could always see the exits in any room. Some things, she had learned, never completely went away, but they no longer ruled her. They were simply part of her story, important but not defining. She had built a life so full of love and joy and meaning that the traumatic past, while not forgotten, had been integrated into a much larger narrative. She was no longer the broken woman who arrived in Rock Springs 21 years ago, though that woman was still part of her. She was also a wife, a mother, a successful rancher, a respected member of her community, and a survivor who had done more than just endure. She had thrived. As twilight deepened into night, Samuel and Zelda went inside to join their family for dinner. The table was full of laughter and conversation, and the casual affection of people who love each other deeply. Looking around at the faces of her husband and children, Zelda felt her heart swell with gratitude. This was healing, she realized. Not a single moment of revelation or recovery, but a lifetime of choosing love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair. It was waking up every day and deciding to keep going. It was accepting help when it was offered and offering help to others in turn. It was understanding that strength came not from never being broken, but from putting yourself back together when you were. It was remembering always that scars just prove you survived, that you are strong, that you are here, still fighting, still loving, still living. And that, in the end, was everything. The evening wore on with stories and laughter, and eventually the children departed for their own homes, leaving Samuel and Zelda alone once more. They cleaned up the dinner dishes together, a routine they had performed thousands of times but which never lost its companionable comfort. Later, lying in bed with Samuel's arms around her, Zelda stared at the ceiling and reflected on the incredible journey of her life. From devastation to healing, from terror to peace, from loneliness to love. It had been a long road, sometimes impossibly difficult, but she had walked it with courage and emerged on the other side transformed. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Samuel murmured sleepily. "For everything, for loving me, for seeing me, for reminding me whenever I forgot that I was strong enough to survive." Samuel tightened his arms around her. "Always, my love, always." Zelda closed her eyes, feeling safe and cherished and deeply, profoundly happy. The scars remained, inside and out, permanent reminders of the worst day of her life. But they were no longer wounds. They were simply part of her story, proof that she had survived something terrible and come out the other side with her capacity for love and hope intact. She had built a beautiful life from the ashes of her trauma. She had loved and been loved in return. She had raised children who would carry forward the lessons of courage and resilience that she and Samuel had taught them. She had made a difference in her community and in the lives of countless horses and people who had passed through her stable over the years. As sleep claimed her, Zelda smiled. The cowboy had been right all along. Scars just proved you survived. They proved you were strong, and she was. Stronger than she had ever imagined possible. The years continued their relentless march forward. Samuel and Zelda celebrated their 25th anniversary, their 30th, their 35th. They became grandparents multiple times over, delighting in spoiling a new generation while watching their children navigate the challenges of parenthood. The ranch remained prosperous, now run primarily by Thomas and his family, though Samuel and Zelda still helped out when they could. They had slowed down with age, content to offer advice and support rather than handling all the physical labor themselves. Rock Springs continued to grow and change. The railroad brought prosperity and progress. New buildings went up, modern conveniences arrived, and the rough edges of the frontier gradually smoothed into something approaching civilization. But the essential character of the place remained the same, a community of hardy, independent people who looked out for each other. Mrs. Henderson passed away peacefully in 1905, surrounded by the many people whose lives she had touched. Zelda and Samuel were among those who spoke at her funeral, remembering her kindness and wisdom. She had been the first person in Rock Springs to show Zelda compassion, and that gift had never been forgotten. As they entered their 60s, Samuel and Zelda found new rhythms for their days. They took long walks together, often revisiting places that held special meaning in their shared history. The livery stable where they first met, now owned and operated by someone else. The church where they had married. The spot by the creek where they had decided to buy the ranch. They told their stories to their grandchildren, wanting the younger generation to understand the hard-won lessons that had shaped their lives. They spoke honestly about trauma and healing, about the long road from brokenness to wholeness, about the power of love and patience and unwavering support. "Your grandmother was the bravest woman I ever met," Samuel would tell them. "She survived things that would have destroyed most people, and she came out the other side with her heart still intact. That takes a special kind of courage." "Your grandfather saved my life," Zelda would add. Not with grand gestures or heroic actions, but with steady, patient kindness. "He showed me that I was worth saving, worth loving. He reminded me that my scars were proof of my strength, not my weakness. That changed everything." One autumn evening in 1910, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Samuel took Zelda's hand and squeezed it gently. "I have been thinking," he said. "About what? About how lucky we are. How many people get to live a love story like ours? How many people find the kind of partnership we have, where two broken pieces fit together to make something whole and beautiful?" Zelda smiled, the lines around her eyes deepening with the expression. "We are lucky, but we also worked hard for this. Love alone was not enough. We had to choose each other every day, through the good times and the difficult ones. We had to be patient with each other's wounds and celebrate each other's victories. That takes commitment and effort. True, but I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every challenge, every struggle, every moment of doubt, all of it was worth it to have this life with you." "Me too," Zelda said softly. "When I came to Rock Springs 32 years ago, I was a shell of a person. I was so broken I could barely function. If you had told me then that I would end up here, sitting on the porch of my own ranch with a husband I love and a family I adore, I would not have believed you. It would have seemed impossible. But it was not impossible. No, it was not. Because you saw past the scars and the fear to the person underneath. You believed in me until I could believe in myself. That made all the difference." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the day fade into night. After a while, Samuel spoke again. "Do you still have nightmares, occasionally? Less than I used to, but they still come sometimes. I suppose they always will. But they do not frighten me the way they once did. They are just memories now, unable to hurt me in the present. And the scars. Zelda touched her cheek, tracing the thin white lines that remained. I barely notice them anymore. Sometimes I catch sight of them in the mirror and remember, but they feel like they belong to a different person now. The woman I was then and the woman I am now, we are connected but not the same. You have come so far. We have come so far, Zelda corrected. Together. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Samuel and Zelda went inside to the home they had built together. It was filled with photographs and memories, evidence of a life well lived and love well given. They moved through their evening routine with the ease of long practice. Two people so attuned to each other that words were often unnecessary. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Samuel pulled Zelda close and kissed her forehead. I love you, Zelda Keller, now and forever. I love you too, Samuel. Thank you for 32 years of showing me what real love looks like. Thank you for teaching me that scars just prove you survived, that they make you strong, not weak. Thank you for being my safe harbor in every storm. They climbed into bed, settling into each other's arms as naturally as breathing. Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered through the cottonwood trees. Inside, two people who had found each other against all odds drifted off to sleep, grateful for another day together and whatever days remained ahead. The story that had begun with a scared, scarred woman stepping off a stagecoach had transformed into something beautiful and enduring. It was a testament to the power of gentle love, patient healing, and the courage to keep trying even when hope seemed lost. Zelda had come to Rock Springs carrying scars inside and out, believing herself too broken to ever be whole again. But a cowboy with kind eyes and steady hands had seen past the damage to the strength beneath. He had reminded her time and again that scars just prove you survived, that you are strong, that you are worthy of love and capable of joy. And in learning to believe those words, Zelda had not only healed herself but had built a life of meaning and purpose. She had loved deeply and been loved in return. She had raised children who carried her strength forward into the next generation. She had made a difference in her community and in the lives of everyone fortunate enough to know her. It was a story of survival and resilience, of trauma and healing, of brokenness and wholeness. But most of all, it was a love story, the truest kind, built not on passion alone but on patience, commitment, and the daily choice to see and honor the best in each other. As Samuel and Zelda grew older together, they never forgot the lessons they had learned on their journey. They taught their children and grandchildren about resilience, about the importance of compassion, about the healing power of love freely given and gratefully received. And every time Zelda looked in the mirror and saw the scars that remained, faded now but still visible, she remembered the words that had changed her life. The words a kind cowboy had spoken in a Wyoming stable so many years ago. Scars just prove you survived. You are strong. She had survived. She was strong, and she had built a beautiful life as proof of both truths. That was the greatest victory of all.